Hi, my name is Rafael Robles, and the name of the article I'll be going over is Using Cognitive Task Analysis to Explore Issues in the Procurement of Intelligent Decision Support Systems. I'll be going over IT software developed systems and what the authors felt like was the main cause of its failures. I'll be discussing their approach to try to uncover that and their suggestions for how it can be better in the future. I'll then wrap it up with my own opinion on the article itself. So any software solution is supposed to resolve a specific business problem. The authors suggested that a successful solution is one that incorporates human cognitive factors and social aspects. But most of these projects fail, or some of these projects fail, and they provide some pretty grim statistics. 50% of IT projects fail to meet CEO expectations, and 42% of corporate IT projects are discontinued. I think most of us have used a software application that failed to live to its expectations or didn't deliver on its promises either. Google Plus. All kidding aside, this is actually a very serious problem. The author stated that the IRS spent $4 billion on a decision support system that just didn't work. And I can tell you from my own experience, working at my company for 7 years, that I've also encountered my own fair share of failed systems. In fact, we're actually working with this current system right now called SPIDA, which the users are completely rejecting. They mentioned that it just doesn't work for them. It's too cumbersome, and they've went and fallen back to their old ways of doing things. So what the authors did is they used the cognitive task analysis approach on the IT systems development teams themselves. The way they did it was through document analysis, which in our lecture is a type of observation where you can bring in memos or emails. And in this case, they brought in approximately 50 documents on a variety of topics. And they roughly sorted into broad categories like frameworks and methods or challenges, mostly to get a feel for how they design systems and what are their methods to design the systems. They also use structured interviews, which in our book is the critical design method, which is supposed to elicit information from experts to try to uncover what were the big issues and how did they tackle them. And in this case, they got experts ranging from 15 to 20 years of experience. Through the documentation analysis, 6 key challenges emerged. The first challenge was identifying user support needs. This is basically gathering from the user what they need the system to do. There were very few documentations on this, and the ones that they did have didn't really provide a good method for addressing that problem. The second key challenge was accommodating changing information and requirements across the system's development effort and the system's lifespan. Traditionally, this is generally a requirements gathering phase and then an implementation phase, which is basically what we used at my work to implement this new scheduling software across the company. And what we did was we scheduled meetings with the different stakeholders and the business units and tried to get what they needed the scheduling software to do, and also looked at what their existing software provided them. We then consolidated that list and then sent it to the vendor. After we sent it to the vendor, we found that the stakeholders had more ideas and more requirements after they had some time to think about it. Unfortunately, we've already sent the list out to the vendor, and all these changes that came after the fact have to go through this change request process, since it now might impact the budget or might delay it. The third challenge was coordinating within the development team. The authors found that they were using a small number of tools, one of them being the System Modeling Language tool and the Capability Maturity Model Integration. Both of those facilitate communication and coordination within the team itself, but none of them really addressed bringing in the domain practitioners or the stakeholders or users. the authors suggested that a better tool to integrate all these parties would be more useful. The next challenge was coping with complexity. As the project started to scale higher and became more complex, and the requirements became more complex, the authors said that there was a tendency to do a reductive tendency, to oversimplify some of these requirements, which could cause a breakdown in what the user wanted and what they ultimately got. The next challenge was coping with the schedule and budget pressure associated with risk management practices. And the last one is an envision world problem. And what the envision world problem is after the software has been built and sent out, how did that change the business? And most of the time, it's after the software is implemented, it's static, it doesn't change anymore. And that could be a challenge. In these structured interviews, what the authors tried to do was transcribe what they said into what they call the transcript chunks, which you can see on the right side, and tried to map them to a system development activity, which you can see on the left side. In parentheses, you'll see a number which represents how many times that was mentioned by an interviewee. After they'd done this, they found that there was really only one mention of anything relating to the user, which was the first one, coordinate with domain practitioner. All the other challenges that they mentioned weren't user-centered or user-related. Another finding that they had was 3 of the activities, which was manage political issues, coordinate with customer domain practitioner representative, and coordinate within the development team, seemed to be a common problem that didn't get addressed through their current system designs methods that they uncovered in the documentation analysis phase. Another problem that the authors found with some of the interviews was a misunderstanding of the approach or the general approach that they were participating in. The 2 approaches mainly for system design was the waterfall approach and the spiral approach, which I have in the next slide. So the waterfall approach is the more traditional approach, which is a requirements, a design phase, an implementation phase, verification, then maintenance. Afterwards, what was developed was the spiral approach, which has 4 quadrants: planning, risk analysis, development, and verification. And you start in the middle with very small, a smaller scope, and gets progressively large as you spiral through the keep circling through the 4 phases. Many of the interviewees thought they were using the spiral method, when in fact, after talking to them a little bit more, the authors found they were actually using the waterfall method. So what the authors found through these documentation analysis and structured interviews was that the current engineering systems development methods that they used didn't resolve the challenges that the experts were facing. They suggested they called a joint systems engineering method, which is basically a transdisciplinary approach to address the human element, namely coordination and communication. They also suggested developing methods to measure long and short-term successes of these softwares. Overall, I thought that the article was very well written, and it was a great example of successful use of cognitive task analysis. My only critique would be that maybe the CWA approach would have been better. Through the CWA approach, they would have been able to find conflicting goals within the development team. They could also investigate some of the specific strategies that they use to accomplish those goals and see if there's any conflicts there. And just an overall better understanding of the IT development organization structure and how that could influence the end product. And that concludes my presentation. I'm now going to open it up to some questions.